From Worldwide Technology, this is the AI Proving Ground podcast. Today, AI agents, what they are, how to use them, and where the value comes from. AI agents are being hyped as the brain of the cognitive enterprise, but our guests, data scientists Ina Poecher and Jason Campagna, a senior director of WWT's AI practice, say the reality is even louder, a deafening onslaught of buzzword bingo that leaders must cut through to find real value. Jason and Ina will explore how focused, task-specific agents can unblock data problems, why start small is the mantra for every first deployment, and what trust but verified guardrails look like when agents are making decisions on our behalf. By the end of this episode, you should be able to identify which early win use cases to chase, how to measure them, and the one question to ask before letting any digital teammate touch production. Let's get to it. Ina, welcome back to the AI Proving Ground podcast. How's it going?
It's great to be here again. I'm doing great today. Really excited to continue chatting with you and with our other guests that keep coming in.
For sure. Jason, first timer, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Love being here, and especially with our recurring co-star here, Ina.
Absolutely. Well, today we are talking about AI agents. And it's interesting, AI agents feels like a term that simultaneously is like at the top of the hype cycle, but very much can deliver on the promise of driving transformational results within the enterprise. The World Economic Forum, just reading right here, recently called AI agents the brain of the cognitive enterprise. Jason, just to start us off, we'll get into some context around what agents are, but the brain of the cognitive enterprise, is that hype? Is the hybrid human agent organization a real thing? What are we seeing right now in terms of AI adoption as it relates to agents?
I think you said it well. Peak hype definitely is how it feels to me right now. It's certainly not to undermine the value and the direction I think we're all headed with an absolute crazy future for all of us. I think there's the dream that we all discuss and experience and so forth, and there's certainly some truth to that. But also the amount of agent washing, to use a buzzword, is definitely very, very aggressive in the market today. Any product, any SaaS provider, any product, any ecosystem partner out there seems to be adding AI to the front or the back or the middle of their company name, product name, or something similar. And it's just a deafening onslaught of buzzword bingo for our customers, and of course for all of us to sort through to figure out what really does work, what really is going to provide the outcomes we're looking for related to agents and agentic architecture.
Yeah. And maybe add on there, filter out for us what you think, filter out the hype and what is the practical usage right now for AI agents, whether it's now or maybe the back half of 2025.
Yeah, I think agents just takes, it's a evolution of what we can do with AI, and it really employs software development practices of calling a function, calling a specialized function that can do a job. So in this case, that function being an agent that is very specialized in its one thing. So it will do it right. And it's not also in charge of 30 other tasks. And it might get messed up in between.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned function calling here. So just for context for listeners that may not be familiar with what AI agents are, Jason, can you walk us through the evolution that we're seeing here? Maybe from legacy AI systems to AI-powered chatbots, RAG models, and now, onto AI agents. What is the difference between all these, or are they building on one another?
Yeah, I think building on one another is the best way to look at it. And important starting place, and the thing I don't hear often, and we talk about at our AI days quite a bit, is agents are not new. They have been around for literally decades. The question is what level of agency, what level of ability to make decisions, take that goal, and like Ina mentioned, take action in the real world. And for me, like the idea of agentic, or the idea of what we call an agent today, is really, really hinged against that. I'm going to do something. I'm going to take action. Funny enough, I could also take action with a legacy decade-old agent. It would be a deterministic workflow, and would be more of a predictive AI model versus a generative AI model. And I think that kind of evolution we're seeing, you look at early chatbots versus AI assistants versus this idea of agents, it's really the fundamental term there for me is agency. Like, how do I actually think about, or how do I really act independently and make decisions? Agency is this philosophical, psychological, and social construct or concept that's usually discussed in terms of like freedom and ability for people to shape their own lives and behaviors and environments, the human condition, if you will. And as we see agency evolve, or as we see AI models evolve to be able to do more and more on their own, and we're able to trust the output we get from them, I think we see more and more advanced agents and more ability to actually take action against predetermined goals in a very deliberate way into the future of AI.
Yeah, I think that's really what makes an agent is its ability to have an effect on its environment. Not just to do something for the sake of doing something, but affecting the environment that it is operating within.
Yeah. Ina, Jason mentioned that agents are not something new, but at the same time, I was reading a VentureBeat survey right here that found 68% of enterprise companies with 1,000 employees or more are adopting agentic AI, which that number seemed high. But then another KPMG survey, 33% of organizations are now deploying AI agents, which is, a substantial increase from the previous year. I just throw those stats out there to show that it seems like adoption of AI agents is accelerating within their enterprise. So what changed over the last 6 to 12 months that enabled this, this curve up?
Yeah, verbiage. Verbiage is a big change, and using it is one massive piece. But also, I think really what they're getting at here is leveraging these generative workflows where you're again having a little bit more agency within these agents. So it's allowing these tools to have a greater effect within the environment that they're operating within. A word to use, like what Jason said, they're less deterministic and more generative, and that is the change that we are really seeing. And the fact that generative AI has come and allowed there to be these stronger, larger changes in these environments is making companies see more value in agents themselves, even though they have been using them for a long time. These are AI agents, and really taking on more of the generative side of AI rather than the deterministic models, machine learning models that we've seen for so long.
It's almost like the word became cool again. You look at the old school predictive rules-based models. Well, I could know what the answer was going to be in a much more deliberate way. Generative AI came along and suddenly it was a lot harder to get those results. I actually think agentic and the buzz around agents is really about the ROI and the outcome that we get from AI. Look at an enterprise trying to deploy generative AI. That's pretty hard, and it's only so much value in production of different things, whether it's images or text or whatever, generative AI basics, versus that ability to act.
I do want to go back to, and I want to keep going with the ROI conversation here in a second, Jason, but you said what changed was verbiage. Are you just talking about Gen AI's ability to understand and talk in plain language, or what do you mean by verbiage? Is that a data thing?
No, the humans using the word agent to describe what they're doing. I had a conversation with a coworker about this probably 6 months ago, and he was asking, well, what are agents? How are they actually, like, what is it? It seems like this is something that I've done before. And I was like, it is exactly something you've done before. You've been using this for a very long time. This is just the newest word to describe with what you're doing and how you're going about doing it.
Okay.
And then it's a very technical guy, and I just explained it in software engineering terms of what was going on. And he's like, well, why is it so fancy then? It's already existed for so long. Why are people so excited? Well, it's a new word. It's a word to describe how we can leverage AI to do these things for us. And as Jason was saying, see ROI for AI and make it easier to see the value that you're gaining from implementing these systems.
Yeah. Well, agentic AI does sound pretty cool by my standards, at least. But Jason, where have we been using that agentic structure in months or years past that we just took for granted? Maybe that it's an AI agent or like an agent working on our behalf.
Well, I think that's where we do get into some differences in where the future is. While agents had been around for a long time, agentic is really a newer term, and that's more of an architectural term. And actually, to me, and I think certainly others out there, agentic has become more of a transformational term for me, much less the architectural word. It's like, well, how am I evolving with AI, especially with generative AI, and not only, but particularly LLMs. And remember, there's different models in LLMs. And I do think that agentic transformation, that idea of how am I really going to capture this marketplace hype that I hear about with AI? And we hear from Jensen and others on the NVIDIA side, that wave, that evolution to agentic, and then eventually to physical AI. I do think it really represents the tangible transformation in large organizations and small towards useful application of AI and what they're trying to get done.
Yeah. Well, sticking with you, Jason, here, where are we seeing the best use cases for AI agents, whether it's right now or kind of what's on the immediate horizon? Where are we going to see the biggest ROI, the biggest bang for the buck on an AI agent use case?
Well, I think the short term, we are definitely seeing a drift towards more fundamental or foundational use cases that feel a lot more like my past around automation. I'm an automation individual at heart. I kind of live and breathe words like toil and how do I automate things out of my life, my work's life, customers' lives that will allow them to free up time to do more valuable work. And so I think we're seeing quite a bit around like AI incident response or agentic incident response, the AIOps, ITOps days of the past. That was really hard. We had to manually write a Python script or Ansible playbook or something similar, whereas now we can get 90% of the way there with a coding assistant. Oh, hey, by the way, I can take all of the scripts that I've written and bring them into an archive and speak to that archive and build the next ones faster. There are things that we can do with agents in today's world that are very automation centric. I think the other big pattern we're seeing is that foundational AI assistant, that knowledge management assistant, seeing the idea of like our Atom, our Atom AI chatbot, many others have a branded kind of front end that all the employees can speak to and uncover the information across the organization, which is really hard. But that crossbreed of the AI assistant with knowledge management is a foundational thing to enable other use cases that may rely on that digitized knowledge, may rely on the output of, so to speak, the back end of an organization to really deliver next generation customer experiences, next generation employee experiences, and then of course a whole variety of industry vertical specific things depending upon where our customers coming from.
This episode is supported by Island. What if the enterprise had complete control over the browser? Island provides a single space where everything organizations need to work safely and productively is built in. Island, the enterprise browser.
Yeah, well, as a data scientist, you kind of sit on the side of like what is actually possible right now. You're looking at the data. So based on what Jason said and based on your experience with some of the client organizations that we interact with, where does the market sit in terms of being able to actually deploy some of this technology and use it right now to drive ROI?
Yeah. So, I mean, the reason we're seeing so many chatbots pop up and similar to our Atom is that your data has to get ready if you're wanting to do these types of use cases. If you want to have really strong agentic AI that does meaningful work and does it correctly, your data needs to be in the right order. And a really good way to test out to see if your data is ready for that is to implement a RAG-based model or some sort of chatbot model so that it can access your data and give you answers from across an organization. So we do this for quite a few customers because that's where they want to start. It's really hard to quantify the ROI on that typically because it would involve me logging the amount of time it took me to email a coworker to get an answer versus asking our internal chatbot Atom. And that's not really an easy quantifiable number. But you can also just not create agents for the sake of having agents if your data is not ready for it. So I think that's why we're seeing so many of these chatbots. And now that it's been 6 to 12 months where everybody had that hype cycle, and now you see almost every website has a chatbot for either customers or for internal folks to use. Now that's why you're hearing the agentic buzzword pop up and come up so often, is because people are more ready for it. They can start implementing an agent at a time rather than getting their data in order. So they know, like, okay, maybe our sales data is the cleanest and most ready. Let's build an agent for that, rather than let's build 12 agents for every single one of our data sources. They'll start targeting the ones that are the most primed and ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I've heard you mention at our AI days, the conversation there of working through data and kind of learning how all these pieces fit together and work. It's not easy, and starting is more important than perfect. And starting to evolve that data in some deliberate way. It's almost like we finally have a pressure point of sorts to really solve or work that data problem that it didn't ever exist before.
Exactly. And people will complain. When internal chatbots don't work well, people don't respond well. Either they don't use the tool or they complain about the tool. And those are really good driving factors and really help data scientists understand where improvements need to be made. And that's how you get that iterative improvement. With our internal chatbot, again, we iterated upon it so many times. It needed improvements because the first time we went about deploying it, we got a lot of feedback that there was room for improvement in the responses, in the data, in hallucinations. And that allows you then to feel the pressure as a scientist of where there need to be improvements and where our users actually care to see those improvements. And with a lot of traditional models, you don't always get that feedback so instantly. People are very, very open to giving very strong feedback when it comes to chatbots.
Heck yeah, I know I certainly have. I feel like in those early Atom days, we went after the page I think many customers start with, which is, okay, I'm going to put this AI assistant out there, and it's going to be the end all be all for all things. And then, funny enough, and this is the very early days even of Agentic, which is kind of funny because it's like last year. It doesn't feel like a year, but we quickly started to kind of cut up the data problem into, well, like you mentioned, like for Salesforce data or for sales data. All right, well, let's go have an agent that speaks over there. And we just brought online internally that capabilities agent that can speak to our sales team of what we can do. And oh, by the way, it goes over here and talks to platform data and Copilot information. That focus, if you will, into those agents and making sure they're purpose built and can understand that data seems to be a really key precipice or control point or what have you in building agentic architectures at scale with success.
And we had to do it because if we wouldn't have started, even with our data not being necessarily in the best shape, we wouldn't have been able to upskill ourselves. We wouldn't have been able to learn about where those improvements needed to be made and how to go about making them. So we took that jump, and we definitely had to iterate because of it. We had to learn, but it improved the skills of our internal developers and scientists, which then allows us to help our customers at the end of the day not make those mistakes and get a little bit faster time to value and time to seeing where the data can be manipulated, massaged to be the best that it can be.
Well, I'm glad the two of you have mentioned Atom a number of times. Just for those out there listening or watching, Atom AI is WWT's AI-powered chatbot. It does have AI agents working on its behalf. In fact, you could go out right now. This is externally available as well as internally available. You could go to WWT.com right now and say, how should my organization be using AI agents? And it would return a load of good information as well as sources that you could go and discover on WWT.com. Jason, I'm hoping you can describe for me who's building. I mentioned Atom AI has agentic features. Who's building those agents and who's determining which agents we go after first? How does that prioritization work?
Well, we certainly have an internal team and there's a cross-organizational group, but also a core development team working on Atom. I do think it's based on need as well as readiness of the data to a certain degree. And I think there's a lot of back and forth. I know at least in our internal capability heat maps, our talk show do, as we call it internally, there's quite a bit on what does the data need to look like to be properly ingested, similar with that Salesforce style agent or even Copilot style agent. And to say that we have it all perfect and figured out would really, I think, undermine the value we have in walking together with our customers on this journey that is agentic. This is a multi-month, multi-year approach that needs to be iterated on. I think AI is really quite different. The mental shift of the output's not black or white, it's gray, and it's shades of gray that you're going to get. You got to think about it differently. You've got to build in feedback loops very assertively into the architecture, and also realize that there simply are different architectures depending upon what you've got to do. I think it's a major element of why agentic is so confusing. I think it's something that actually, in talking with Ina in particular, had pulled into our AI to keynote around. This is a sample architecture. This is a way of approaching things as a part of that. I think we've also adopted that with Adam, where, okay, for this piece, we're going to do it like this. And for this other piece, we're going to do it a little differently because of the needs of the data, because of the needs of the platform it's interacting with, the API call, or depending upon the use case and MCP server that of course we're speaking to. But I think how that evolves is really critical. And as we add or snowball, if you will, more and more use cases in that, it's still under the banner of Adam, but Adam gets smarter and smarter as it has friends that are different agents that are highly tuned for the particular need they have, and it can pull all of that together into a response for the end user and drive that experience.
Yeah, I think Adam, you can think about as Adam is the orchestrator, and the agents are the ones actually doing the action on the environment, if we're talking about that. So the agents do the actions, they bring back the information to Adam, and then Adam takes all the information that it got from its friends and or agents, and then puts that into a very nice little blurb of text for you, the user, to understand what happened in the background. So Adam is the orchestrator, the leader, the delegator in this whole system. But we do refer to the conglomerate as Adam AI.
Well, that's a great analogy. What about the concept of like a citizen developer who's able to perhaps make their own agents? I'm thinking that would just create kind of chaos here. Are we going to see an explosion of agents from citizen developers, or am I just out in left field there?
You're pretty on track there. Vibe coding leads to a lot of agents that do a lot of things, and they might not do it very securely, and they might also not do anything, but they are being developed. While a little chaotic, that is a good way for people to learn. They have the opportunity to do so, and those agents don't have to be made public to everybody. Not everybody has to have that sent out to their instance of Adam. I think we had like 7 or 8 agents that everybody has access to within Worldwide. And then there are agents that other people have developed for their own use cases, their own applications, but it is not available, say, for myself. I don't have access to that because that is not something that was deemed necessary for the entirety of the Worldwide staff.
Yeah. Well, Jason,
I think it's
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating dynamic because for the first time, and I think there's kind of a running joke, at least in around here, is what's the most popular coding language going to be in 5 years? And it's a trick question because it's English. At least many of us believe it's English. That idea of vibe coding or citizen developer, there's a whole lot more I can do that. I'm not a coder by nature, but my 10-year-old and I built a Tetris Bejeweled mashup or Candy Crush mashup as a game. And that innate ability to do some really interesting things organically without knowing coding in a team or as a small subcomponent of an enterprise, I suddenly can get a lot of stuff done. Copilot or Copilot Studios are a great example of that. I think we're seeing some patterns here for low code, no code, a lot of different platforms that are out there that different teams are using that is sitting right next to, well, wait a minute, I could go buy an agent to do this. Or, hey, wait a minute, this SaaS application I have in my enterprise is now coming towards me and saying, hey, we've got several agents or an agent platform of some kind, or you can buy this agent. And there's this weird crossbreed between those. And you go a little further and suddenly there's more of a developer slant to that platform. Think like, to stay on the Microsoft bandwagon there, Azure AI Foundry is a more development oriented, feeding ground, care and feeding platform for agents and for AI models in general, that I can develop from the ground up. I think there's a redevelopment of software or a rehash of software here in the broader sense. It's really interesting to me with a cloud background. Microservices architectures came along for the ride, and now suddenly it's like, well, let's swap out one of the microservices with an agent. We still have APIs all over the place. That's not necessarily going away, but there are certain things we built a lot of code around that suddenly I have a lot of value in training, evolving, put a feedback loop in place, provide a goal for an agent or an agent architecture that really enhances what that application is able to do for the enterprise.
This episode is supported by Island. What if the enterprise had complete control over the browser? Island provides a single space where everything organizations need to work safely and productively is built in. Island, the enterprise browser.
Yeah, as more agents enter the fray, whether they're kind of official enterprise initiatives, or they're coming from citizen coders or vibe coders and things of that nature, how from an architectural standpoint, Jason, how would enterprises create a platform that can handle all those intelligent agents like at scale? What needs to be considered there?
I think it's actually multiple platforms. It reminds me a lot of, Ina said it perfectly. There's an orchestrator that sits at the top of this that, is like, quote unquote, the main agent or the main interface for a lot of people that hides things that are underneath. But that doesn't mean it doesn't need to be built. It also doesn't mean that there aren't subcomponents of like a platform that's over here that's managing some parts, some of those agents. And there's another one over here that is doing that depending upon its purpose and fit for purpose, if you will. I think this is the challenge that many of our organizations have. And it reminds me a lot of the early automation cloud days where I want to have infrastructure as a service. I want to have something as a service that, evolved into function and platform and other, layers, if you will, of cloud service capabilities. Well, now you have GPU as a service, and there's even jokes about AI as a service. Well, what does that even mean practically these days? Because there's the definitions all over the place. The net, though, is I'm now going to have hundreds, thousands of agents, some of which are very small and tight and fit for purpose, which, by the way, may not even be a generative model. It may be a smaller model of some kind. It may be boring old machine learning of some kind that is doing something highly, highly specific. Is this an image of a cat or a dog? As the joke has gone for decades at this point. But it's part of a larger structure that is aimed at an output and aimed at an outcome that the organization's after, which may be as high level as employee experience and saving a ton of time not finding things, that kind of thing. I think, I'm curious your thoughts here on like, how do we get a handle on that? Or is it just the sprawl that we're all dealing with that is going to evolve and there's going to be a lot of plays?
Yeah, well, I mean, the biggest problem or the biggest hurdle to overcome is going to be making it repeatable and easy to integrate any agent into any system, meaning there needs to be a little bit of standardization in what is expected as an input to a model and what's expected as an output to a model. So, I mean, we've heard now, I think we released an episode on MCP and different protocols like that. So what that relates to for traditional networking folks, it's your HTTPS or TCP protocols. It's what is expected when you have an incoming message or an incoming request, and what is expected for your output, and how are you going to communicate that? So when you have all these agents, and as Jason said, it starts to sprawl pretty quickly when it comes to these different tasks. You need them all to be standardized in how they accept information and how they respond. And once you have that in place and there's an agreed upon methodology to do so, then you can have that sprawl and know that the agents will respond in that standardized way, and you can use that information, and you don't have to change something every single time for each specific use case. Instead, you just keep using the same framework every time. No need to rebuild the wheel, and you save yourself a lot of time, and then it becomes less daunting to have to create such a scalable architecture.
If we have this influx of agents, let's just let's think as if we've considered MCP and agent to agent, which you're correct. We did have an episode. There's probably a couple episodes prior to this one, touching on that matter. But if we have this fleet of autonomous AI agents working kind of behind the scenes, how do we as humans or as the business know that they're working to drive everything forward? Like what level of trust do we give agents right out of the gate versus how much human in the loop do we need to have? How do we know it's going to be working for us in a positive way and we're not just taking it for granted?
A lot of checks and balances to begin with. I think trust has to be gained. A lot of folks, specifically people like my older relatives, are definitely more apprehensive to the idea of letting an orchestrator orchestrate a bunch of agents to go do tasks. If I could tell my grandma that, she would, I think, lose her mind. So you're going to need to build that trust up, show the thought process of a lot of models, which there are quite a few of the very basic large language models are doing that now, explaining how they come to their reasoning or explaining their reasoning. And in doing so, you start to build that trust. And when you have agents that do more specific tasks and they do those tasks correctly, that trust is built. And then you can have more agents that work together or call upon sub-agents. But it's iterative, as is everything in AI. It's iterative and it needs to evolve, and as does the trust in that technology. But Jason, I'm very curious on your thoughts on this as well.
It trust but verify, as the saying goes. People respect what you inspect, including AI agents. You know, I feel like that built-in feedback loop, like you have to design an agentic architecture from day one with a very clear feedback loop. The other thing, obviously that's the all-seeing eye is like a joke of tough, that one slide I always use. I feel like there's also another component here that is often kind of skipped over because of all the rhetoric and the hype in the marketplace, which is lots of agents is a good thing, which sounds counterintuitive because it would create sprawl. But the focus of those agents and the ability to tune them and I joked about the cat versus dog thing, whatever it is that is a subcomponent of what the agentic architecture needs to do, cutting that up makes things easier, not harder. It's very, very, very difficult to deal with one big giant trillion parameter model and have it do everything. And I think that in conversation, I've heard that from customers at times because they heard from a particular vendor, like, I got the solution. Here's what I'm going to do for you. And here's what you're going to use. And it's going to be awesome. Which, not to undermine, like, that may be true to a certain degree, but it doesn't necessarily work when you get into broad scale and the ability to make sure that output is reliable and highly trustworthy. And so I think we see a drift towards that idea of like, well, what about a small language model here? And what about a different model over here? And what about training the models and the agents to begin with to raise their hand and say, hey, I need a human. I need a human to look at this thing. I'm not really sure. And here's why. And describe the rationale, that idea of human in the loop. I believe that the agentic architecture is innately with a human in the loop. It starts with here's a human, here's a human, here's a human, here's a human. And how are we taking the non-valuable tasks that are required from the organization? Let's put an agent over here for that, an agent over here for that. And suddenly, before you know it, that's more of an integrated approach, which I think also reflects the idea of a human agent versus an AI agent. And, the crazy hype rhetoric out there around, is AI going to replace all of our jobs? And the general saying of, well, no, not really, because if I am able to use AI as a human, I can be much more productive. And it's really more of an accelerant to those that know how to use it.
Yeah. Jason, I love the trust but verify. As a former journalist, that reminds me of the common saying, if your mother says she loves you, go and check it out. So I'm happy that just rang in my head there based on what you said. But I'll give you a scenario here. What if we have agents running around on our behalf? What if an agent starts negotiating with a vendor or a supplier late at night or something, and it's unbeknownst to anybody, and they make a decision on our behalf, and it's not the right decision, whether it's a hallucination or data poisoning or something that causes it to make the wrong decision? Who owns that in the value chain? Is it an executive sponsor? Is it the developer of that agent? Who has responsibility here? And maybe I don't know yet.
That is such a hard question and is a big part of AI, of security. Data scientists working with those who actually secure the environment in which the models are living in, there needs to be cross-functionality. And right now, we're getting better at it. In the past, there has been very little. And data scientists aren't known for being necessarily the best communicators. I've been working on it really hard myself. Cybersecurity specialists, not known for being the best communicators. So you try and put those two groups in one room and have them work together. It can be difficult, and getting that cross functionality is so important so that everybody is aligned and we're designing AI from the beginning, or AI models in general, and the systems in which they live in a secure fashion so that there is accountability and you know where these decisions were made, how they were made, why they were made. It really does come down to the security and the policies that you have surrounding your AI practice.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about, years past, least privilege, zero trust, so on and so forth, access control. Before we were talking about humans, but are we applying those to agents now too?
Yeah, I would say so. And I'm going to steal your line. I think I've done this a couple of times now with conversations, like a model is only as valuable as the decisions that it helps drive, something to that effect. I think that's where, trust but verify comes in. And as a part of the deployment of an agentic architecture, especially out of the gate, you're not going to let it just go out and make decisions like that. You're going to confirm, just like you would with a new employee. You bring someone new into the organization, a new agent in the organization, and you're training it with its surroundings, its context, its world, what the output needs to be, what that decision needs to look like. And, why did you make that decision? Looking at that reasoning, like you mentioned before, I do think that's a key part of the deployment methodology and process. You're not going to just unleash the agent out of the gate. It doesn't really start like that. And especially if it's critical impact automation, like in incident response, there are certain actions that it's going to be more of a, hey, I saw this. It pulls that needle out of the haystack that it needs to act on and says, here's what I believe the action is. And that is shuttled as a package to a human that then actually hits go. And while the agent may, hit an automation framework and of course, actually take that action, the confirmation of that decision and making sure the model's decision, the agent's decision is as valuable or as on point as we want it to be, I think is tangibly how that really looks in the real world.
Yeah. And also to add on to that, we're not giving every agent access to every single data point within an organization. Zero trust. Yes. The agent will have access to the data that it needs to make the decisions that it is in charge of. A Salesforce agent will have nothing to do with HR data and should never have anything to do with HR data. So they will get access to the data that is required for their task and not more.
Yeah. Goes to the tuning of those agents, and it also, perhaps also relates to the, the whole concept of guardrails. What guardrails are put in place for all of the agents or specific agents, like the HR agent may be highly restricted, to your point. Whereas another one that's, I'm trying to see everything in Office 365. This is a fun one we hear about all the time with customers because they barely know what's going on over there half the time. It's quite a challenge. So adopting the access controls of that other platform and need to trust that works. And then of course you got to go fix that if that's a problem as a part of the agent's response. That idea of guardrails, I think is a fundamental thing. And there's a whole lot of platform related interactions there with NVIDIA and others to ensure those guardrails are in place with these agents.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're talking about a certain level of human responsibilities here as we start to integrate and adopt more AI agents. Is there a reskilling that needs to happen for, just call it the organization in general to be able to mold into like a supervisor of multiple or dozens of agents?
Very, very much so.
What do I need to learn?
I actually think it starts, and there's a discipline forming here around context engineering. Prompt engineering, of course, is the word that's been around for a long time. It starts with simply talking to AI. I love your reference to, like friends and family kind of a thing. It's like I was at my stepfather's 70th birthday on Friday and just got buried with AI related questions and so forth from all, friends and so forth. And there is a conversation of, listen, just speaking to AI is the starting place, and encouraging everyone out there, listen to this. And as we do with our customers, it really does start with simply talking to AI. And funny enough, though, when you're doing that, you're learning how to prompt, you're learning how to provide that AI model with context, a persona, an understanding of the output you're looking for. The specificity necessary there at times is more than I think folks realize. You often get that context in a human to human conversation, and you ask questions and you go back and forth, maybe similar to how we're doing in this podcast. You've got to load that all in to the AI to begin with and think through that response, or tell the AI to ask you questions to begin with. And I think that that's a skill set that evolves into system prompting versus user prompting pretty quickly, when I need to provide the agent with a goal and an understanding of what its output needs to be, and the specificity and focus of that becomes really critical. And you look at that maturity of how to work with AI, that adoption curve, I think, is a really significant challenge for our customers. And I think something that we've really got to focus on. I mean, Ina, what have you been seeing?
Yeah, this really resonates with, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years ago, when we were using a lot of reinforcement learning algorithms. And we still use them, they're just used a little bit differently now. But getting the engineers that are using your tool and who are supposed to provide that feedback was really hard. They didn't necessarily want to take that extra step to provide feedback to the algorithm as that human in the loop to help improve it. And that's just no longer a choice. If you want these generative models, these AI models, to work with you and work with you well, you need to provide that feedback. And inherently you do it when you ask it to rephrase an email maybe a little bit nicer and less sassy. Or if you say, well, please write this from the perspective of a data scientist, I'm writing to a project manager, use language that they will understand. So you're inherently providing that feedback with how you're talking to these models in natural English, but still providing the feedback, like within, again, Adam, our tool, we have a thumbs up and a thumbs down. Providing that thumbs up and thumbs down can really help those on the back end who are developing the model. While your feedback to the model itself helps the model's internal understanding of the context in which it's operating, the actual feedback of thumbs up, thumbs down, why was this not helpful? Why was this helpful? Did it hallucinate? Is super helpful for the scientists on the back end that are trying to improve the architecture of the model itself.
You mentioned data before or earlier. One of the more interesting things that I think we keep running into is the interaction between the data and the data quality or readiness and the prompt itself. It's like at times it doesn't give you the right response because there wasn't enough context in the prompt or enough understanding in the prompt, even though the data might have been there. And there's this, like, to your point on like adoption with enterprises, like it's actually a little bit of both. You got to get the data right, but you also have to be able to speak to AI, or better yet, you may have to train one agent to talk to the other agent correctly to pull that information and tune that accordingly. There's such an interesting interaction where the data may actually be okay, but your prompting, system prompting, user prompting may not be where it needs to be. And perhaps even relates to the sharing of, oh, I built this agent. Well, yes, you built a bunch of context into it, and you share it with your team that helped that happen so they could ask it very simplified questions and it figures that out on its behalf. It's a really crazy interaction of transformation for me.
Yeah. Yep. I think we'll see a lot more of that as the humans using these models are able to upskill themselves and their prompts become better, and therefore we're able to have more complex interactions between models themselves.
Yeah, it's almost as if, you talk about businesses succeeding or failing based on culture because it enables collaboration, so on and so forth. It's almost like you need an HR program just to facilitate that collaboration and how agents talk to one another. Or am I already granting AI too much humanity?
We're seeing folks in the marketplace head that direction. There's a couple out there that have actually merged IT and HR for this very reason.
Yeah. Well, a little bit forward facing, what are we going to see maybe not over the next 6 months, but like, 12 to 18 months as we get into like 2026 or even the back half of that year, are we going to see a situation like that common situation where it's one person is controlling dozens of agents and they've come up with $1 billion company and they're running it with one employee? Or how are we going to start to see agents mature and be utilized within the enterprise?
Okay, I'm gonna go first.
I'm leaving the time there for you.
So I think, as Jason mentioned, right now we're seeing a lot of automation, the automating of tasks that are easily repeatable and aren't necessarily so complex that they need a human there to do it. And where we're going, in my mind, is to where you're able to say something to a model like, I would love to go to Ontario for the weekend. Please plan my trip for me. And that general of a statement then kicks off this process of the model saying, okay, my prompt is to book a trip to Ontario. For this, I need to get transportation. I most likely know based on my content or context where the user is living. So, all right, I know also from past requests, they like to fly. They don't like trains. So I'm going to book a flight for this upcoming weekend to Ontario. Okay, great. Maybe my follow-up question then is, all right, what type of lodging are you looking for? So then you get a question back from the model. What's your lodging? Hotel, Airbnb? Are you looking for a villa? I don't know. Those types of questions. So you answer, provide a little bit more feedback. Great. Model goes out, finds a couple options within different budgets, comes back to you, gives you what you're looking for, just says, hey, here are 3 options. Which one would you like me to book? This one. Great. It goes out and books it and then has all those pieces ready for final approval. And then you get to have it all done. So rather than myself going to Airbnb.com, going to Delta and booking all these things, it goes through and does that. That is my ideal next state in the next 18 months so that my booking of travel becomes significantly easier. But
yeah,
that type of a transformation where we go from automation to really just giving a general prompt and then working together to solve it.
No, I love that. Jason, maybe translate that to the business aspect. Like what is that kind of, I want to book travel mean from an enterprise perspective?
Well, I first, I just love the specificity, that you're coming at. I do think that's where the real magic is that level of specificity or personalization of what can AI do for me, I think is really critical. And like for me, I start to think about, okay, well, how am I going to achieve the ROI and the impact that AI has been promising me if I'm a business leader in one of our customers? And we are definitely seeing a drift from the vertical use case into the foundational side. And I think a lot of that is about the learning of the concepts and topics we're talking about here. Because to do it at scale, you got to dig in and you got to realize the transformation, the fact that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And like, I think, you hinted on like the idea of the model understanding when it doesn't have enough context. I think we're going to start to see that become more and more aggressive or pervasive or whatever you'd like to use. And context engineering is a particular passion of mine lately in terms of learning. It's pretty new. It's like, how do you engineer the context across agents? How do you pull in my personal context into an enterprise agent where you may not have access to that? Like I speak to ChatGPT on personal subjects, have projects built which effectively act like agents at times, especially with tool usage. And it's like, well, there's a bunch of context there for my travel plans if I go into the corporate side that none of it doesn't pick any of that up. And so like, how does that start to integrate? How do we start to do more with that for me unfolds this crazy ecosystem of different platforms, different agents, different layers of platforms, low code, no code, the citizen developer thing versus developer. I've always been really passionate about those orchestrator style frameworks or platforms. And then all the parts that they manage underneath them in the different ecosystems, that evolution towards an ecosystem of agents, an ecosystem of platforms, and me coming in as a user and having my personal and corporate context in line with that as I ask it questions. And then it saying, hey, I don't have enough context. In order to do what you're asking me, here's what I need. Or it goes and asks based on the initial ask, it goes and asks other agents and then comes back or what have you, or even multiple LLMs the same question and then rolls that up into a response to get real crazy for a second. That idea of synthesizing across multiple LLMs to get a better decision or a better level of agency, I do think is the key feature we're going to see in agentic architectures, including across platforms, to be super crazy about it. And it heads real fast to, hey, that's all cool. What do I get out of it if I'm a business? How do I drive productivity, the employee experience? How do I evolve that in such a way that becomes highly impactful so that those employees can do more creative, more, call it higher value work for end employee or partner related experience for that organization's end business. And it gets into fantasy land fast. I think anything beyond the 18-month window is stretching with what it really is or where it really goes. But concrete usage today, like we're seeing in many of our customers and many projects we've been involved with, I think continue to evolve in some really magical ways. I'll use that word to get all buzzwordy about it.
Yeah, that's a great look forward on how we could use AI agents or how we should be thinking about them. Real quick, I know we are running up on time here. Jason and Ina, both of you, I'll start with you, Jason. What are maybe one or two things organizational leaders need to do today to work towards that Fantasyland, Tomorrowland concept? Could be technical, could be change management, could be across the board.
Step away from perfect. Focus on a highly iterative, feedback-driven approach. Thinking about data, models, and platforms, infrastructure, and especially foundationally security. Figuring out those things against a use case or something that's impactful for the business is definitely our practical approach in a nutshell. And realizing you're not going to get it right. Fail fast. Fail a lot. Feel free, because the value we've seen customers see comes from that learning that you really can only experience by doing. You can't go read 4,000 ways to build an agent. You got to go and actually tactically do it, in my opinion.
Yeah. I would add to that, start small. You don't need to do everything in one go. It won't work. So start small and then get everybody's buy-in and make sure that your teams are working with one another. Again, speaking to your data scientists and security engineers and developers, they all need to work together to make this the most successful version of itself. So really push for them to work together and overcome those barriers that might exist at this point in time.
Yeah, excellent insights. Well, to the two of you, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk about, an issue that I know is, at the top of a lot of leaders' mind these days, AI agents. Ina, I'm sure we'll see you soon. You seem to be popping up here every couple of weeks. And Jason, you absolutely nailed it here today. So hopefully we'll have you back on soon as well. So thanks again.
Happy to help anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, that's a wrap. 3 key takeaways stand out. First, start small, learn fast. Deploy one narrowly scoped agent to expose gaps, and then iterate as quickly as possible. Pick a single dataset, set up a retrieval-augmented chatbot, and schedule weekly feedback reviews. Second, architect for trust. Agents should raise their hands when confidence drops, so you need to log every decision and live behind least privilege access controls. Remember Ina's mantra, trust has to be gained and guardrails are non-negotiable. So embed human-in-the-loop checkpoints, use protocols like MCP and A2A for standardization, and enforce zero-trust credentials per agent. And finally, focus on measurable ROI. Early wins come from automating minutia, things like expense approvals, incident response, and sales knowledge. The goal isn't novelty here, it's freeing people for higher value work. Put those 3 pieces together and you'll move from pilot to production with confidence, turning agentic AI from buzzword to business outcome. If you like this episode of the AI Proving Ground podcast, please consider leaving us a rating or review on whichever platform you're listening on. And you can always find more episodes and other great video content on WWT.com. This episode was co-produced by Naz Baker, Kara Kuhn, Mallory Shaffrin, and Ginny Van Berkom. Our audio and video engineer is John Knobloch. My name is Brian Felt. We'll see you next time.